Can I call Willie Docherty, Chair of Standing Orders, to give his report for this afternoon? Thanks, Willie.
Conference, hopefully the last Standing Orders report. Congress, in order to progress the remaining business, we will now only call movers and all motions will be formally seconded. However, in the case of amended motions, the amender will be called to second the motion. When moving to the debate, we will call for opposing speakers only and offer movers the right to reply where necessary. Can I ask for your cooperation in speaking times, and I'll remind you that that is 4 minutes for movers and 2 minutes for everyone else. I'm confident that these changes will allow all our business to be concluded by the end of the session. But I take note that any motions, in the event that any motions don't get taken, they will be remitted to the General Council. I move.
I take it that's agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Congress. Welcome back to the afternoon session, delegates. We now take the final motion as promised from the morning session, and I call and invite motion 21, Visitors Levy Scotland, and I invite Edinburgh Trades Union Council to move the motion. Thank you.
Conference President Claire Robertson, Edinburgh Trade Union Council, moving motion 21 on the Visitors Levy Scotland. It's some years ago that Edinburgh TUC lobbied the City Council, demanding that the Council have the power to levy a tourist tax. We gave examples of European cities that levied the tax. We gave progressive examples of how the tax was used. And eventually the Council accepted our case and undertook to lobby for necessary legislation. On the way to getting the legislation, the Council consulted with the Edinburgh public. The right opposed a new tax in principle, and the employers in the tourist sector said the tax would drive tourists away. Edinburgh TUC campaigned for the tax to be supported by the local trade union movement and the public. The response to the consultations was overwhelmingly supporting of the tourist tax. The tax became law and is now called the Visitors Levy. It's a new power for Scottish local authorities. The City of Edinburgh Council is now preparing for the implementation of the tax in 2026. £50 million may well be raised per annum. Lobbying is still needed to ensure that the levy is used appropriately. We do not think the levy should just be used to market Edinburgh. In Edinburgh, we have identified 2 key areas where investment is required. In alliance with Living Rent, we are calling for the City Council to invest in affordable housing. At the moment, people in Edinburgh, particularly young people, are disadvantaged by the impact of tourists visiting the city. 50,000 people come a day in the summer, and this impact drives up the cost of living, including rents. City Council needs to invest to improve the wages, terms and conditions of workers in the hospitality sector. There needs to be investment in schools and training and further education. There needs to be a fair working charter, especially for the hospitality sector, and trade union organisation needs to be encouraged. I hope Congress will support this motion and that the General Council will write to all Scottish local authorities as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for the motion to be formally seconded. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 21, Visitors Levy Scotland. Please note the General Council recommends support. I will now go to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 21, Visitors Levy Scotland is carried. We now move on to section 8 of the agenda, Trade Union Organising. It's getting late. I call on motion 79, Pensions, ensuring that the government and employers take responsibility. I now invite Prospect to move the motion. Thank you, Delegate.
Congress, President. Dan Connolly, moving motion 79 on pensions on behalf of Prospect. Congress, we are witnessing a steady and deeply concerning decline in the quality of pensions across the private sector, where once defined benefit schemes provided workers with the prospect of a dignified and secure retirement, they've largely been replaced with defined contribution schemes that offer little more than the bare minimum. Schemes that too often fail to provide anything resembling comfort or certainty in retirement. And the result, a generation of workers facing the grim reality of either relying largely on the state pension or working until they drop, carried from the workplace in a box. Defined benefit pensions are disappearing. The Institute for Fiscal Studies reported that the number of DB schemes in the private sector had halved from 24% in 2005 to just 12% by 2020. And since 2022, we've seen a further 2% fall. The trend is clear, and it's alarming. This has not happened in isolation. Years of economic strain made worse by political mismanagement, 14 years of Tory economics, now Donald Trump's attempt at a trade war, have hammered pension pots. Workers on the cusp of retirement are now being forced to postpone what should have been their well-earned rest, and younger generations will bear this burden for years to come. Meanwhile, hiring practices have changed. We have a more diverse workforce than we had years ago, and this is a positive development. But the persistent imbalance in caregiving responsibilities continues to disadvantage women financially. A widening gender pensions gap, a growing inequality that the Labour movement must tackle head-on through bold organising and strategic negotiation. What we're seeing is nothing new. Companies cutting costs on workers' conditions to boost profits for shareholders. Everyone in this room knows the playbook. And the consequences of not fighting back. If we fail to act, the full scale of this crisis may not hit us until it's too late, when it has already entrenched itself over 2 or 3 generations. But Congress, we can act now, and we must act now. We have the power, the insight, and the responsibility to stop this erosion before it becomes irreversible. We ask that Congress instruct the STUC to lobby government and support campaigns to raise the value of the basic state pension and halt any further increases to the state pension age. Work with TUC Education, Scottish Union Learning to create and deliver training programmes that empower our union reps and negotiators to secure better employer contributions, whether through non-contributory schemes or through enhanced matching models that fairly distribute pension costs. Support branches in carrying out equality impact assessments to ensure the gender pensions cap is actively being tackled and not ignored. Congress, this motion is about fairness and dignity. It's about standing up now so that our members and those who come after us can look forward to retirement without fear. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on the motion to be formally seconded. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 79, pensions ensuring government and employers take responsibility. Please note the General Council's recommending support. I'll move you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 79, pensions ensuring that the government and employers take responsibility is carried. I now call on motion 80, drop the discretion clause. I invite the Hospital Consultants and Specialists Association to move the motion.
President, colleagues, Alan Robertson, HCSA. The Hospital Consultants and Specialists Association has been around as long as the NHS itself. Indeed, this is why it was founded, to support doctors working in our National Health Service. I'm pleased to say that over the years, like many organisations, we got less stuffy, and today we have the privilege of supporting all levels and all grades of NHS doctor, as well as doctors working in some other organisations, and I'm proud to say that we do so robustly. Further, we are honoured to stand side by side with our trade union affiliates and their members, our fellow workers. Indeed, we have done so on many a UK picket line over the last 2 or 3 years, and it is in the spirit of this partnership that we choose our motions, so that they are pertinent to all workers and not only doctors. Picking through a policy to support your member, that moment when your heart sinks at the dreaded clause, at the manager's discretion. Governance policies regularly include these clauses, which can be used to invalidate policies which otherwise might be balanced and fair. The clause renders the policy meaningless, as the decision is simply up to the manager. This management tool is ubiquitous but most commonly found in policies that can give something to our members, such as special leave or flexible working requests. Congress believes that these clauses allow managers to choose whether or not to apply the policy. This results in members being treated differently and leads to allegations of discrimination where members have protected characteristics. Many governance policies detail clearly what their position is and then include this escape clause. Why detail what is fair, then decree, but it's up to the manager? Where the clause is used because the policy is not clear, then this amounts to an admission that the policy itself does not actually meet the business need and only takes us back to the requirement for the policy in the first place. To summarise, a policy which sets out to instruct a fair agreement around a type of workplace dispute which arises from time to time fails all involved, most especially our members, if it contains within itself the option of setting it aside to resort to a Victorian default position that it is simply up to the manager. Congress, let's stop agreeing to the inclusion of these clauses in policy and let's stop signing them off. I move motion 80.
Thanks, Alan. Congress, I now call for the motion to be formally seconded. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 80, drop the discretion clause. Please note the General Council's recommendation is to support. I'll now go to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 80, drop the discretion clause, is carried. Thank you for staying where you were, Alan. I now call on motion 81. Members must sign on the line. I invite the Hospital Consultants and Specialists Association to move the motion. Thank you, Alan.
Within the NHS, management referrals to occupational health are rarely shared and agreed with members prior to submission. This is despite many referral forms reminding managers expressly that occupational health ethics and data protection law make this a prerequisite. This practice of excluding members from sharing in the content and detail of their manager's referral to occupational health is no accident, and neither is it simply about practical convenience. In reality, it allows managers to include inappropriate information to suit management agendas and to ask leading and unfair questions. Further, it prevents members from getting our trade union advice on the content prior to agreeing these occupational health management referral submissions. Occupational health services can be split into two groups, in-house and contracted. However, neither is immune to lopsided influence from management. Congress believes that the remedy for biased management occupational health referrals is that members must sign and date management occupational health referrals to confirm that they have read them, that they understand them, and that they agree to their submission. Congress, I move motion 81.
I now call for the motion to be formally seconded. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 81. Members must sign on the line. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 81. Members must sign on the line is carried. Tell me if I'm going too fast. No? I'll keep going. Congress, we are now entering a group debate. Delegates, please note that the amended motion 82 and 83 will be taken as a group debate. Both motions will be moved and seconded, and then I will call on the General Council to make a statement. Can I now call amended motion 82X and regulation of social media? I invite Dumfries and Galloway Trade Union Council to move the amended motion. Welcome, colleague.
John Dennis, Dumfries and Galloway, TUC. X, as we know, is owned by Elon Musk, one of the richest men on the planet. He's best known of the brown-tongued sycophants at the court of the big orange blob in Washington. He's in charge of what they call the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. What that means, he's in charge of cuts of jobs of tens of thousands of trade union members employed by the federal government of the USA, particularly US aid, education and health, but in other departments as well. Musk's title would be much more accurate if it was Cuts Under Nazi Trump. Think of the initials. With recognition to Janie Godley, R.I.P. Right, some people might pick nits with that to say that Trump and Musk are not really Nazis, but then remember Musk and his Sieg Heil salute at one of Trump's rallies. It was definitely a Nazi salute, not a Roman one, as is sometimes claimed. Musk is a rich white South African who left there just before apartheid ended. He was so incensed about Twitter that he bought it and sacked all the fact checkers because Twitter had blocked Trump's false claims. Now it's X and no fact checkers. Its algorithms promote the likes of Andrew Tate or Stephen Yaxley Lennon, as he likes to be known. Musk backs Farage and has talked about funding Farage's election campaigns. He's urged him to admit Yaxley Lennon, which Farage hasn't yet, but lots and lots of Yaxley Lennon, and let's call him his real name, supporters are already in your Reform UK. Musk owns Tesla, SpaceX and Twitter. We can't really boycott Tesla because there's very, very few trade unions have got enough money to afford one of those. SpaceX, well, we could maybe encourage him to go up in it, in a spaceship, heading for the moon, preferably on a one-way trip. But realistically, the only way to get at Musk that we can, as trade unionists from this country, is to boycott X. Now, we're told that some unions are not quite ready for this, so we've accepted the remit. On the second part, there are powers in a recently passed law to fine the tech companies that promote racist and misogynist stuff online, but maximum fine £18 million or 10% of their global revenue. Can you honestly see the pathetic Ofcom or Starmer ever going down that road and upsetting Trump? Given that what Starmer's been doing, dancing to Trump's tune, cutting overseas aid and cutting benefits. We do accept the remit, so you'll not hear any more about it after this debate.
Thanks, colleague. I now call on Fife Trade Union Council to second the amended motion. Thank you.
President, Congress. I refuse to call it X. It's Twitter, and it will always be Twitter. Because for the simple fact, an X is far too close to a Nazi swastika symbol. And Elon, Goebel, Musk has used that very well, so it's always going to be Twitter to me. But what I want to bring in, Twitter is a cesspit. The entire social media, if you're in the wrong algorithm, you find yourself in this well of despair and horribleness. But it's not just Twitter. Meta has also now killed all fact-checking. So again, it is opened up to the far right, misogynist and hate bringers. I mean, it's a terrible thing, but we can't forget YouTube. because all these people have major YouTube channels as well. So it's not just X, it's the whole social media, so it's probably good that it's been remitted, and that people, organisations who use these sites have to look at it. And do we walk away? I don't know. Maybe you need to stick in there and put the message forward, you know. I don't know. So I'm happy to remit it. But let's be honest, we need to be calling these people out, and we need to be putting pressure on governments to regulate this, because if Trump gets his way and Elon Musk gets his way, they will deregulate throughout Europe and throughout the entire world, so that hate will spread right across without any checks and balances. Thanks, comrades.
Thanks, Delegate. I now call on motion 83, social media platform X. Can I invite West Lothian Trade Union Council to move the motion?
Congress, Lewis Clark, West Lothian Trade Union Council. X was bought by that billionaire idiot for the sole purpose of control and power. This power and control is abused, and it harbours a stagnant fear, stifling debate and discussion in society. Musical, artistic and political expression are being curtailed and directly attacked, which we have seen this week with the smear campaign against NICAP for their unwavering support of the Palestinian people just trying to survive occupation and genocide. This attack from the rich and powerful on musicians, on artists, on trade unionists must be strongly opposed, and silence is their goal. We must not allow that stagnant fear to stifle our own movement and progress forward. Online space is important, and some workers it's crucial for their income and their employment. And we as a movement, we can be the voice of that hope and change in that space. But the discussions do need to be had, however, on using specific platforms, indirectly supporting them, and inadvertently exposing our members to a powerful algorithm that does promote dangerous ideas and dangerous content. I'm glad to see that these discussions are already happening, and I'm happy to remit. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call for the motion to be formally seconded. Formally, thank you. I now call Ben Lund to make a statement on behalf of the General Council.
Ben Lund speaking on behalf of the General Council. The General Council notes that several affiliates are currently considering their approach to X and other social media platforms. We are also aware of the potential impacts it may have on our individual members as well within our unions, any of these discussions. Moreover, the TUC has convened a network of union communication officers to discuss a strategic approach to engaging with X and wider social media platforms. These discussions are ongoing, and please have it noted that this is an invitation to debate this further. This remittance does not end it, it's more of a debate to carry on, and we want this debate to carry on. The STUC believes it would be preemptive to take a position on these issues until discussions have concluded. We therefore ask the movers of amended motion 82 and motion 83 to remit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. As both movers have accepted remit, motion 83, social media platforms, is remitted. Motion 82, amended motion 82, regulation of social media, is remitted. I now call on motion 84, abuse of attendance management policies, and I invite the NUJ to move the motion. Thank you, colleague.
President, Congress, Conrad Landin, National Union of Journalists. This motion is about how policies supposedly are designed to address workplace sickness and end up making workers more sick. The NUJ has supported members who have been driven through attendance management procedures repeatedly in defiance of a common sense approach which would take into account the devastating effect that this was having. Sometimes it is deliberate, a means of workplace bullying. Congress, the rigid and cack-handed policies we have seen are bizarre and counterproductive. One employer which dragged an NUJ member through such a process had a procedure where 4 sick days in a year half the national average taken by workers would automatically trigger a disciplinary, but a continued absence of 3 months would not. We hear from politicians that workplace sickness is at an unsustainable level, that people feel too comfortable reporting mental health conditions, that too many people are off long-term sick, but nothing acknowledging the real issue, that the nature of work, piss-poor pay and grueling conditions are making people sick. So we need sickness policies which address this and don't make our members sicker. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for the motion to be formally seconded. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 84, abusive attendance management policies. Please note the General Council recommends support. I will now move you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 84, abusive attendance management policies, is carried. I now call on amended motion 86, decline of safety in the workplace. I invite East Kilbride and South Lanarkshire Trade Union Council to move the amended motion.
Kenny Wallace, East Kilbride and South Lanarkshire Trades Council, moving motion 86. On Monday, we remembered all those workers who were killed in the workplace who had promised to fight for their living. But is it getting harder to protect our workers from harm? The latest HSE figures released and highlighted in the excellent Hazards magazine shows 138 workers were killed in Britain last year in the workplace. There were 17,623 employer-reported major injuries under RIDDOR. The construction sector saw a 70% increase to 51 deaths. And Scotland had the highest death rate by region by 18 workers. Also, 1.7 million workers suffered work-related ill health, resulting in 34 million lost working days. These figures show no real decline in 10 years. And why is this? Is this a direct consequence of HSE inspections falling from 20,000 to 14,600 in this period? Or the fact that HSE prosecution cases for health and safety breaches have fallen below 250, the lowest in 10 years? Or the fact that 100 million has been cut from the HSE budget? This is not a coincidence that we're seeing no improvement on these figures. With these facts in mind and the lack of routine scrutiny or accountability, many employers will see this as an opportunity to forgo or relax health and safety measures. We cannot allow employers carte blanche to gamble with workers' health and safety. Anonymous QR codes for reporting health and safety issues will never replace the need for health and safety reps on the ground or workplace visits. Unionised workplaces are statistically more safer places. This was not more highlighted than during the 12-year redevelopment of the Battersea Power Station, where Unite Health and Safety reps working with the employer ensured there was no serious accidents. The pursuit by employers to maximise profits and minimise deadlines or interruptions cannot be workers' expense. This is not a green light for employers to cut corners. We need to maximise health and safety as a priority by having a visual presence on the ground, ensuring HSE get back to visit workplaces with regular frequency. Health and safety is non-negotiable. Workplace health and safety are a basic right and not an issue that should be compromised at any time. Workers will not be sacrificed to line employers' or shareholders' pockets. I move.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on Prospect to second the amended motion. Thank you, Delegate.
President, Conference, good afternoon. My name is Bernadette Easton and I'm NASUT, support motion 86, the decline of safety in the workplace. The HSE budget has been reduced greatly since 2011, a rapid decline in funding. What is happening to safety in the workplace? Is the safety of workers not a priority? So many sacrifices over several hundred years, so many deaths. For what? A return to Victorian standards of safety for workers. There is a 25% decline since 2010 of HSE inspectors going to check workplaces. Workers are suffering, scared to speak out about health and safety issues. The lack of funding for the HSE has reduced standards and the enforcement of safety standards in the workplace. We have to urge the HSE how it uses its resources. Government needs to review health and safety standards for all workers. No worker should go to work to be hurt, injured, or even to die. Is the decline of safety in this workplace where we are in 2025? Money and budgets before workers? This is morally wrong and unacceptable. We should not put up with this. Please support motion 86. Protect the HSE to enforce effective health and safety standards to the highest level for all workers, parity and equality. Don't cut a basic human right for all workers. Not a 35% cut to HSE budget in the last 10 years. As Benjamin Franklin said once, long ago, all ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on Prospect to support the amended motion. Thank you.
President Congress, Stuart Robertson from Prospect. I've just got a few facts and figures to give you. So, health and safety inspector numbers in 2010 were 1311, in 22 they're 974, 41% reduction in the inspectors. Their funding in 2010 was 228 million. Their funding in 21-22 was 185 million, 45% cut. Inspections in 2010 were in excess of 25,000, currently 16,000. If you look at the prosecution numbers, in 2015 there was 672 convictions. In 2019 that dropped to 361, and in 2023 that dropped to 216. Is that a reflection on how good employers are at looking after our health and safety? I would suggest no. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on opposing speakers in the debate. That was amended motion 86, decline of safety in the workplace. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll take you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Amended motion 86, decline of safety in the workplace, is carried. I now call on motion 87, Maui, organising workers in Maui. I invite the Bakers Union to move the motion.
Congress, Sarah Woolley speaking on behalf of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union to move motion 87. It's been over 2 years since our campaign at Maui's Rosyth plant began, yet Maui, the world's leading salmon producer, still refuses to engage with us. They will not come to the table for a meeting despite our repeated requests, but we do not back down. We cannot back down because there are hundreds of people working at that site that are counting on us. From the very start, our union made it clear we're here to stay until Maui does right by its workers. Our union represents now many of the workers at the Maui Rosyth plant. These members have already seen the value of union support. We've been by their side in disciplinary hearings, raised health and safety concerns, and a report will be coming out shortly, some of those findings, and started to give them a collective voice. Our presence is growing. Workers are joining our union every single week, and that is exactly why Maui's management are so desperate to shut us out. The company is perfectly happy to work with unions elsewhere. In Norway, for example, Maui recognises the Norwegian Food Workers Union and abides by a collective agreement that affords the workers there better terms and conditions and far better pay. Maui's workers in Norway have a voice and decent conditions, but here in Scotland, Maui shows a blatant double standard. They refuse any dialogue with us or the workers who have joined our union, and they're hiding behind Britain's draconian anti-union legislation. Rather than engage voluntarily with their employees' chosen union, they cynically insist on waiting until we meet the legal threshold for mandatory recognition. This is a company that made record profits last year, over €300 million in Europe alone, yet they won't meet to discuss basic issues of pay, safety and dignity at work. Worse still, the company's response hasn't just been indifference, it's been hostility. When our union began organising, Maui's management tried to intimidate and discourage our members. Even elected officials who showed support for these workers and met a hostile response from the company. Alex Rowley, MSP, has helped launch our campaign and has spoken up for those that work there. For his trouble, he and others in his team have been treated as pariahs by Maui, and that tells you everything, doesn't it? They would rather attack those who support their workers than address workers' concerns. When an employer behaves so shamefully, we naturally turn to our political leaders for support. After all, Maui's operation in Scotland does not exist in a vacuum. This is a company that has benefited from millions upon millions of pounds of government grants and public subsidies. We've every right, haven't we, to expect leaders to stand up and hold companies like that accountable. But the silence has been deafening, apart from, as I say, with Alex Rowley. What is disappointing, though, is that those same politicians operate an open-door policy for corporate lobbyists. We all saw government ministers make time to meet with Salmon Scotland, the industry lobby group, and even attended their events to hail the success of the salmon industry. They were eager to stand with executives and sing the praises of Scottish salmon's economic contributions. It shows that there is very much a cosy relationship between big business and politicians, a relationship that shuts out the very workers that those politicians claim to represent. You cannot claim to be for fair work or to stand for working people, then refuse to even listen to those workers when they seek justice. Fair work has got to be more than a slogan or a tick box in a manifesto. It has to be reality for people like the Maui workers, and our leaders should be part of making that real, not ignoring it. The situation at Maui is challenging, but it also underscores why our trade union movement exists. If those in power won't help, then we must empower the workers to do it themselves, to build power and to force change. And if politicians grow too comfortable with corporate backslapping, then it falls to us as trade unions to shake up that cosy arrangement, because we will not allow the rights of workers to be sacrificed at the altar of corporate influence. We are really proud that these marginalised, low-paid, precarious workers have chosen to organise under our banner and are building power and forcing changes in their workplace against a corporate giant. And whilst we dispute the claim that other unions have production worker members at the Rosyth Maui site that we are organising, we're not organising engineers or fish farm workers. We're always open to working with other unions in the food industry. We've got a proud history of doing that with multiple unions in the room across multiple national sites, and we don't see Maui being any different. It is disappointing it's taken 2 years for it to be raised, that there's an issue. It's no secret that we've been organising there. We put a motion to Congress last year, but we will happily remit the motion, and we look forward to working with those unions involved in Maui. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. And I call on a formal seconder for the motion. Thank you. I now call on Susan Quinn to deliver a statement on behalf of the General Council. Thanks, Susan.
President, colleagues, the General Council is calling for motion 87 to be remitted. We're entirely supportive of efforts to unionise the fish farm and fish processing industry in Scotland. It's a growing industry, and while there is union recognition in Norway, the industry is largely unorganised in Scotland. Conditions in fish farms, but particularly in Maui, are a matter of major concern for workers. The pattern of ownership, with much of the industry dominated by overseas corporations, is also of a concern. Trump's tariffs are a major challenge to the industry. It is the job of unions and the entire movement to make sure that workers do not bear the brunt of these tariffs. However, it's been brought to our attention, the attention of General Council, that at least 2 unions, in addition to the Bakers Union, have members who work at Maui Rosyth. The GMB union also has recognition in at least 1 other Maui site. General Council calls on unions organising in the industry to work together to ensure that all workers across Maui and the wider industry can benefit from union recognition and union organisation within union sites that don't currently have recognition. So we call for this to be remitted.
Thanks, Susan. The mover has accepted remittance. So motion 87, Maui organising workers in Maui, is remitted. I must be talking too fast, I'm getting dry. Congress. We will now take motions from section 10 of the agenda, international. Before we start this debate, I want to give a short update on behalf of the General Council. Last year, you asked us to refresh the boycott, divestment and sanctions strategy. I am pleased to say that a refreshed BDS resource for trade unionists has been published today. Whatever the outcome of this debate, I hope the resource will help promote a unified campaign approach to Palestine. With that, I move to the group debate. As indicated by standing orders earlier today, amended motion 106, 108 and motions 107, 109, 110, 111 and 112 will be moved separately as part of the group debate. I will ask the proposers of each motion and also seconders of motions where amended to move. I will only take speakers in opposition to the motions and any consequential right of reply. I now move to amended motion 106, end arms sales in Israel, and I invite the PCS to move the amended motion.
President Congress, Fran Heathcote from PCS, moving motion 106. Congress, we cannot be bystanders. We cannot walk by on the other side as we witness what is now widely accepted as a genocide. The ICJ has ruled that there's a plausible case, and Amnesty International now confirmed that. 58 years of illegal occupation, decades of settlement building and ethnic cleansing, Israel's Gaza onslaught in which over 50,000 people have been killed since October 2023. Lancet now conclude that the true figure could be 186,000 dead. But successive UK governments have stood by. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, says that Labour supports the International Criminal Court as a cornerstone of the international legal system. Well, if you respect international law, then you follow that up with action, not just empty words. The International Court of Justice ruled in July last year that the Israeli occupation of Palestine is illegal, that Israel must dismantle its settlements and provide full reparation to Palestinian victims and facilitate the return of displaced people. Yet here we are, just last night, at least 12 killed, including children, by Israeli strikes. Nearly 77 years since the Nakba, and it is a Nakba fit for the 21st century because we are witnessing on our mobile phones in real time the obliteration of hospitals, of homes and of human beings with high-tech weaponry made here in the UK. The horrific reports coming out of the West Bank demonstrate what happens when you turn a blind eye and you condone war crimes. There are over 60,000 pregnant women in Gaza, yet with the health infrastructure all but obliterated, the consequences have been catastrophic. Miscarriages up by 300%. Babies born anywhere with whatever sharp object is lying around being used to cut the umbilical cord. Babies in displacement camps go months without being washed. The number one cause of child deaths on earth this year is Israel. Remind yourself of that again and again. And UNICEF reporting instances of C-sections being performed post-mortem. The list of human suffering is incomprehensible. When did we become so desensitized? Whilst this level of suffering is allowed to continue, we have to do everything in our power to resist it with as much unity as we can muster. Because internationalism is a core principle of the trade union movement. Standing up for oppressed people runs through everything that we do. That is why the message from the trade union movement has to be unequivocal. We are not going anywhere until that killing stops. More children were killed in Gaza in the first 4 months since October 23 than in all wars worldwide in the last 4 years. Congress, there is no moral or legal case not to ban all arms sales to Israel immediately. If we respect international law, there should be sanctions on Israel too. The UK government has not imposed sanctions, not expelled diplomats, in sharp contrast with the approach to Russia. The West put in place comprehensive sanctions there, and we ask for the same treatment of Israel. And I want to quote the Jewish Voice for Peace, who wrote this year, "Never again means never again for anyone." The recent green light from Trump means that there will be no restraint at all on the attacks on Gaza. As successive governments stand by, it is up to us, in our unions, in our workplace, as individuals, to speak out, to protest and to campaign. And please think about that when you vote. PCS proudly supports the Boycott, Divest and Sanctions campaign. And Congress, I want to conclude, if it's okay, by reading you a poem, because amongst all the legal arguments and all the horrific images, we must never lose our humanity. It's by the Palestinian poet and freedom fighter Ghassan Kanafari, and it's very short. I wish children didn't die. I wish they would be temporarily elevated to the skies until the war ends. Then they would return home safe. And when their parents asked them, "Where were you?" they would say, "We were playing in the clouds." Congress, please support this motion.
Fran, thank you for that. I now call the NUJ to second the amended motion. Thank you, colleague.
Conrad Landon, National Union of Journalists. And since we put in our amendments, and we're proud to second this motion, but since we put in our amendments, it has gone out of date. There are now at least 171 journalists and media workers who have been killed since the 7th of October 2023, including Israeli and Lebanese journalists, but overwhelmingly Palestinian journalists. That's 10% of journalists in Gaza dead, the highest proportion of any profession. And they have been killed with armaments imported from the West. Our union is now collaborating with other organisations to build a case to demonstrate that attacks on journalists by Israel have been systematic and targeted. And we will then present this research to the UK government as a case for the immediate suspension of arms sales to Israel. Earlier this month, just days before her 25th birthday, the photojournalist Fatima Hasouda was killed by an Israeli airstrike alongside 10 members of her family, including her pregnant sister. She had said, "If I die, I want a loud death. I don't want to be just breaking news or a number in a group. I want a death that the world will hear, an impact that will remain through time, and a timeless image that cannot be buried by time or place." It's time to end the killing of journalists and all Palestinians, and end the sale of the arms that kill them. Proud to second. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call motion 107, Stop Arming Israel, and I invite the Aberdeen Trades Union Council to move the amended motion. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, President Congress. Kate Ramsden from Aberdeen Trade Union Council, moving our motion setting out action in solidarity with Palestine as we head into the 20th month of genocide in Gaza, and as we see Israeli violence on the West Bank continue to grow. Like everyone here, we stand on the side of humanity, and we utterly condemn Israel's massacres of children, women and men in Gaza. We condemn the targeting of health workers, aid workers, and as we've just heard, journalists, and now the withholding of essential aid, condemning Gazans to death by starvation and from sickness and injury. These are all war crimes. I'm quite disappointed that affiliates could not bring themselves to support the original composite, because that would have given such a powerful message about our solidarity across the trade union movement in Scotland and across all our affiliates. However, we are where we are, and our motion condemns the UK government's complicity in the genocide, as we should. As we've just heard, it's shocking, it's unacceptable to issue arms licences at all to Israel. But our motion also it also condemns the STUC's commitment to boycott, divestment and sanctions to bring pressure to bear on Israel to end its violence and apartheid towards the people of Palestine. And we welcome the upgrading of that. But sanctions mean sanctions, and we need to really think about what about pushing our government and the UK government to bring sanctions. It's the least, and it also focuses on our Scottish Government and what they should be doing to engage with the BDS strategy and demand that it puts its money where its mouth is and does not provide government funding to any business involved in supplying arms or military hardware to Israel. It is the very least it can do, and the General Council should be lobbying the Scottish Government to this end. It also looks at what more our trade union movement can do, and it calls on all affiliates, and that's all you here in the room, all you that stand on the side of humanity, all of you that condemn the murders of 20,000 children and all the other women and men that have been killed. You need to all go back and support and promote BDS amongst your members. It's up to us to campaign for pension funds divestment from companies complicit in Israel. And that's our existing policy. That's not new. We just refresh it here today. We know from solidarity with South Africa all these years ago how powerful boycott, divestment and sanction can be as a peaceful weapon for freedom and justice. We owe it to the people of Palestine. We owe it to the people of Gaza, who are murdered day by day by day, even now, to really make boycott, divestment and sanction mean what it says and to really put pressure on the state of Israel. We really need Israel to be ending this genocide, and that's the clear message we should be given as a trade union movement, our Scottish Government should be given, and our UK Government should be given. And we will never stop demonstrating and demanding that as long as this genocide continues. So please support this motion, but more importantly, please take the actions called for. Let's all stand on the right side of history, comrades. Please support.
Thank you, Kate. I now call for a formal seconder of the motion. Thank you. I now call for amended motion 108, Palestine and scholasticide? No. Yeah. Thank you. I invite UCU to move the amended motion. Thank you, Delegate.
Hello, Lena Bungren here from UCU. And I was sitting reading, actually. I'm here to move the motion on scholasticide in Palestine. And I'm laid down to the podium because I was sitting, sadly, reading the updated figures of the number of teachers and students who have been killed, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. So since the motion, since we sent in the motion, sadly, the figures have risen. And I'm just going to give some of you some figures to you. About just yesterday, the Ministry of Education and Higher Education in Palestine said that 14,784 students have been killed, 24,766 have been injured. The majority are in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. 880 teachers and administrative staff have been killed, 4,247 people have been injured. Hundreds and hundreds of schools have been bombed, have been destroyed. I think over 100 schools are completely wiped out. HE institutions in Palestine have been destroyed and bombed. This is a genocide, this is an ongoing genocide, and it is shameful that so many of us are also, specifically people like me who's a university worker, implicated in this genocide because of the investments that our employers have. So I work at the University of Edinburgh, and which some of the student campaigners have now renamed Balfour University, because the Balfour Declaration, which of course initiated initiated the Nakba, so initiated the ethnic cleansing and forced migration and murdering of Palestinians. The Balfour Declaration that was signed in 1917 was signed by Balfour when he was Chancellor at the University of Edinburgh. So there are historical links between the ethnic cleansing and murdering of Palestinians and my own employer, but there are also contemporary and current links in terms of material investments. So this motion calls on STUC to do several things, engaging with politicians, MSPs and MPs, for example, but also to write to all of the Scottish University principals to demand that they, well, we demand divestment, obviously, from companies who make us all complicit in genocide, but also to take strategic, direct action and kind of take direct steps to start already now rebuilding the fantastic education structures, universities, schools that once existed in Palestine and will exist again. So, to conclude, Palestine will be free, so please support this motion, and thank you for the amendment and seconding as well.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on the EIS to second the amended motion. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you, President. Congress, Nicola Fisher, EIS, seconding motion 108. In 2018, I travelled to Palestine with a teachers, trade union delegation, the NEU, and myself and our former General Secretary, Larry Flanagan, and we visited schools in the West Bank where there was already significant evidence of the determination by Israel to prevent, to interfere with, to destroy and disrupt the education of Palestinian children and young people. We met with the General Union of Palestinian Teachers, who told us how teachers leave home at 3 AM or 4 AM in order to get to school on time because they have to pass through so many checkpoints and wait and queue and be questioned at those checkpoints. And at times they never got through the checkpoint at all, meaning schools were understaffed, classes were combined, or sometimes schools were closed. And that their children were put off by the daily attrition of trying to get through the checkpoint themselves and often gave up coming to school altogether. In Hebron, we visited a school where the head teacher reported increasing numbers of pupils attempting suicide, sometimes by taking medication and sometimes by running towards checkpoints in the hope that the soldiers would shoot them. She described how she and her colleagues regularly chased after pupils to try to stop them reaching that checkpoint and save their lives. That was then. And now, of course, the disruption, the prevention of education, the destruction of education has gathered apace and apace and apace to what we see now is galacticide as described in the motion. Sorry, colleagues. The United Nations Human Rights Committee have looked at the situation in Gaza and a report that more than 80% of schools in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. They refer to the systematic obliteration of education through the arrest and detention of teachers. They talk about the destruction of heritage sites, mosques and churches. They talk about women and girls facing attack because they are not in schools. And to leave you with their words, the persistent callous attacks on educational infrastructure in Gaza have a devastating long-term impact on the fundamental rights of people to learn, freely express themselves, depriving yet another generation of Palestinians of their future. We owe it to the children of Gaza to uphold their right to education and pave their way for a more peaceful and just future. Please support the motion.
Thanks, Nicola. Congress, I now call on Edinburgh Trades Union Council to support the amended motion.
Thank you, President. It's Claire Robertson from Edinburgh Trade Union Council supporting this motion. So we know that interrupted learning not only hinders students' immediate academic progress, but also undermines long-term prospects, trapping children into a cycle of underachievement and limiting the ability to progress educationally. But in Palestine, without timely and effective interventions, even more severe repercussions threaten the future of an entire generation and indeed the whole Palestine culture and nation. Our amendment was made to help highlight that the children who have been so brutally affected by war in Palestine also need considerable support to overcome the trauma and associated symptoms of physical, psychological and emotional distress. One of the campaigns that could be considered is the Hands Up project, which is committed to social justice, global citizenship and freedom of expression, and upholds the belief that language learning is enhanced through creativity, performance and collaboration, and collaborative interactions. The project affords opportunities for children in circumstances such as the war in Palestine to communicate across borders in a spirit of peace, dignity, tolerance, freedom, equality and solidarity. So I ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call motion 109, Justice for Palestine. I invite Midlothian Trade Union Council to move the motion. Thank you.
Rab Patterson, Midlothian Trade Union Council, moving motion 109, Justice for Palestine. President, Congress, since Israel's latest onslaught in Gaza, millions worldwide have been gathering weekly to show their support for Palestine and their condemnation for the actions of Israel. During that time, there has also been a growing anger that in many cases their governments have continued support for Israel or have made little or no attempt to hold Israel accountable. Anger at the repeated use for decades by the permanent members of the UN Security Council, and that includes Britain, of their veto to block measures to censure Israel and bring Israel to account. Anger at being constantly told that the genocide in Gaza began after October the 7th, when Israel from its founding has been displacing Palestinians from their land and appropriating it for themselves, with increasing regularity, increasing violence, and increasing impunity. Anger when the conflict is described as tit-for-tat violence, when Israel has highly sophisticated weaponry, intelligence and defence systems, tanks, artillery, air force, army, navy, even nuclear capabilities, while the Palestinians have none of those. Angry when we are told that Israel has the right to defend itself, when there is no such right in international law for occupying powers. Indeed, it is the occupied who have the right to resist, even with arms if necessary. Angry when the entire population of Gaza has been internally displaced and plans are made to make that externally. Angry when Israel continues with impunity to target civilians, residential areas, hospitals, schools, shelters for the displaced, aid warehouses, aid distribution centres, aid convoys, refugee camps, ambulances, press, fire crews and medical staff. Angry when food, water and medical supplies are blocked and use of starvation as a weapon of war. This motion calls for sustained and increased pressure to be placed on Israel. It calls for an end to the genocide, an end to the siege, an end to the occupation, the removal of the apartheid wall and apartheid laws, the removal of the settlements, the recognition of the sovereign state of Palestine, and especially to bring the perpetrators of war crimes to justice. And to make real the Palestinian refugees' right of return. Please support.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for a formal seconder for the motion. Thank you. I now call motion 110, Lasting Peace in Palestine. I invite Aslev to move the motion.
Thanks, Congress. Craig Bahari Aslev, moving motion 110 for lasting peace in Palestine. Congress, what's there to say on Palestine that hasn't been said countless times before by people all around the globe and my colleagues before me now? I know that since the last time this topic was discussed at this conference, a further 30,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza, a total somewhere between 50, 100,000, 186,000 as we heard earlier, 20,000 children, 14,200 people still trapped under the rubble in areas inaccessible to the rescuers, months since aid has been allowed into Gaza. We hear the reports of the abuse, human rights violations, harassment, rape, torture, murder, the systematic policy to starve the Palestinian population, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, We've seen the videos, heard the cries of the children who lose their homes, their families, their parents. Parents who've had their children sniped in the head. If these horrors are not enough to call an end to the slaughter, what is? Neither the killing of Israeli civilians nor the collective punishment of the people of Gaza will do anything to end the occupation or bring about peace. Something must be done, and done now. Congress, Palestinian trade unions send out calls for support. It's our job to answer those calls. A just and permanent peace consistent with international law must include the right to collective self-determination of the Palestinian people, as well as a resolution on the right to return to their homes. The governments in Westminster and the Scottish Government must do everything they can to ensure this happens. End all arms sales to Israel, direct and indirect, now. The UK Government must immediately recognise the State of Palestine. It must call for the release of thousands of Palestinians held indefinitely without evidence or trial. And it must also call for a halt to the expansions of the illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank, return the land to the Palestinians. As trade unionists, it's our duty to support our siblings across the land. We must continue the call for a ceasefire in Gaza, a peaceful solution to the conflict across the whole of Palestine, including the West Bank. End the genocide. And I'm glad to have heard that word used often at conference, not glad. Because if that word offends you, as it does some people, then you choose to be offended by the truth. And if I can just end with a wee quote by the Irish band Kneecap and their performance at Coachella last week. It seems our own First Minister's quite keen to talk about Kneecap as well just now. If you're not calling it a genocide, what the feck are you calling it? They didn't say feck. Congress, support peace, support this motion.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for a formal seconder for the motion. Thank you. I now call motion 111, Palestine. I invite Dundee Trades Union Council to move the motion. Thank you, colleague.
Thank you, President. Comrades, moving motion 111 on behalf of Dundee TUC. Our movement here has an outstanding record of fighting fascism and calling out fascists, and calling for the expulsion of the diplomatic representative of a fascist genocidal state as a continuation, is just a continuation of our proud anti-fascist history. We call for a public inquiry into the UK government's collusion in the genocide in Gaza. We praise governments taking Israel's genocide, ethnic cleansing, mass displacement and illegal occupation of Palestine to the IJC. We praise the ICC and its issuing arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his military leadership. But we call on the ICC to broaden its investigation and include politicians from countries who are actually supporting the ongoing genocide in Gaza. That Starmer calls himself a human rights lawyer is surely a contradiction in terms. Starmer has the blood of over 60,000 Palestinians on his hands. He should be in jail, not in 10 Downing Street. Saif Adila, 19. Abdul Jabbour, 16. Ahmed Nassasar, 31. Hamza Al-Kamash, Musab Adili, Jihad Adili, Adi Katoni, Karam Jabrin, Ismail Taras, Tariq Kassas, Mahmoud Jakra, Omar Shatia, Isa Jabila, Adel Bashkar, Youssef Ashmar, Abdulaziz Kadi, Ahmed Hashas, Qasim Aboud, Motaz Madini, Jafar Dabasa, Ahmed Rashid, Mohammed Amir, latest killed in the Balata refugee camp only a couple of days ago. Comrades, since October 23, 144 citizens of Nablus, Dundee's twin city, have been murdered by the Israeli occupation forces. The 22 brothers I have just remembered have been killed since January. Dundee TUC remembers all these brothers and sisters that have fallen in the Israeli genocide of Palestine. We stand with our twin city. We stand with the people of Nablus, and we stand with the people of Palestine. Solidarity.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for a formal seconder of the motion. Thank you. I now call motion 112, Palestine. I invite Glasgow Trades Union Council to move the motion. Welcome, Delegate.
President, Congress, Keith Storr, Glasgow Trades Council. We're very disappointed that we didn't manage to composite it all. But what I would say is that everything that is in our motion has been rehearsed by the people you've already heard. We can take all the time in the world to repeat the horrors and identify the horrors that's happening in Palestine. But hearing it and repeating it isn't enough. We need action. I'm therefore not going to take up an awful lot of your time because you know the arguments, and the quality of the arguments that we've heard should convince us all that what we have to do here is support all of the motions on Palestine. We should certainly support ours. It's not really a laughing matter. We have debated this endlessly. All of our trade unions have their own individual policies, their own individual strategies, but we're not following them out. What we need to do is support today's motions from all the ones about Palestine, but we also need to go back into our own trades councils and our own unions. The policies are there. We need to make sure they're implemented. Please support this motion and all the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Congress, I am now calling for any delegate wishing to oppose a motion. I'll remind opposing speakers to clarify and indicate which motion they are speaking to in their opposition. Can I call for any opposing speakers? Thank you, Congress. We now move to the vote on each of the motions. Amended motion I'll now move to the vote on amended motion 106, end arms sales to Israel. I'll now go to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Amended motion 106, end arms sales to Israel, is carried. I will now call on the vote of motion 107, stop arming Israel. I'll now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 107, stop arming Israel, is carried. I now call the vote on amended motion 108, Palestine and scholasticide. I will now move to the vote. Can I see all of those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Amended motion, Palestine and scholasticide, is carried. I will now move to the vote on motion 109, Justice for Palestine. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion 109, Justice for Palestine, is carried. I will now call the vote on motion 110, Lasting Peace in Palestine. I'll now take you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion 110, Lasting Peace in Palestine, is carried. I will now call the vote on motion 111, Palestine. I'll now take you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 111, Palestine, is carried. I will now call the vote on motion 112, Palestine. I'll now move you to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 112, Palestine, is carried. Congress, can I thank all delegates who participated in that discussion and debate? Can I offer my thanks? And can I just say your contributions made a lasting impression on many of us in this room and beyond. Thank you for that discussion. Congress, I now call motion 113, Ukraine and Russia. I invite Midlothian Trade Union Council to move the motion.
Patterson, Midlothian Trade Union Council, moving motion 113, Ukraine-Russia. President, Congress, the long-running war between Russia and Ukraine is causing massive loss of life, displacement of populations and damage to the infrastructures and economies of the two protagonists. Russia and Ukraine are locked in a horrendous stalemate with little chance of outright victory to either side. But every certainty, the longer it continues, of increasing loss of life, further displacements and more destruction, as well as the ever-present risk of escalation to a wider conflict and even the possibility of a nuclear conflict. Billions of pounds worth of highly sophisticated weaponry pouring into the region to both sides of the conflict will not help bring the war to an end. It will only prolong a murderous war in which neither side can gain outright victory. It will only add to the mass casualties and destruction, postponing the much-needed and inevitable peace talks that are the only way to end the conflict. United Nations General Secretary Antonio Guterres was right when he said as far back as late 2024 that it was high time for a just peace in line with the United Nations Charter and international law. More recently, Trump has made a deal with Russia to carve up the mineral and energy resources in areas Russia may hold at the end of the conflict. Trump has also imposed US control of Ukraine's remaining mineral and fuel resources when the war eventually ends. This is no way to end a war, and we should extend our full solidarity to trade unionists and workers in the Ukraine facing this American expropriation of their natural resources. Such plans as Trump's are not the way forward for ensuring peace. We need a justly negotiated end to a conflict that has already cost hundreds of thousands of lives. both military and civilian, while ratcheting up international tensions. Such a peace initially calls for an enduring ceasefire along existing military lines, which have not significantly changed for more than 2 years. Security for Ukraine and Russia can only be secured by a lasting agreement between the two countries themselves in the context of Europe-wide arrangements which offer security to all by threatening none. For too long, the West has only paid lip service to the so-called international rules-based order. Now is the time to make it a reality. The British government should be using all its efforts to supporting the United Nations to use its tools and expertise to bring about meaningful efforts towards a just, lasting and comprehensive peace in line with the United Nations Charter and international law. Congress surely we need to invest in diplomacy and peace building through a truly international rule-based order in line with the Charter. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on a formal seconder for the motion. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers in the debate. Thank you. Thank you, Congress. That was motion 113, Ukraine and Russia. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll now go to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 113, Ukraine and Russia is carried. I now call motion 114, Cuba, off the list. I invite Glasgow Trades Union Council to move the motion. Thank you.
Keith Storrick, Glasgow Trades Council. Use a phone, they said. It's a lot easier than the bits of paper you usually go about with. It doesn't seem to be the case. It's not working. Yesterday we heard from the Cuban ambassador just how difficult things are in Cuba, thanks to the reintroduction of sanctions after a week. In among all the sanctions, there was actually quite a strange thing. There was 7 different things happened in the first day of Trump coming into office about Cuba. And one of them was to restrict travel by Cubans or any countries who support Cuba's medical interventions or medical support across the world, on the basis that the medics who do this were slaves and they were being human trafficked. You know, it's quite interesting that being put on the terror list because you support medical aid to the global south and to places in Latin America who don't have the facilities themselves. And it's not just, if you like, the poor countries that the Cubans have been supporting. When Italy went to the EU at the start of the pandemic and said, we're in real trouble, we're being overwhelmed here, and the EU turned down any aid to Italy, it was the Cubans and the Venezuelans who came in. The Cubans and the Venezuelans, a poor country in the Caribbean that since 1959 has been under severe sanctions. If you as much as supply a screw for a broken machine in Cuba, then you are blacklisted, and your manufactured goods cannot go into America. It's a hidden side of sanctions. It doesn't just affect the Cuban people. It affects the poor of the world. It affects them. Medical emergencies. There are people who have moved from the United States, firefighters who were first responders in 9/11, whose insurance ran out, are now being treated, and have been for a number of years, been treated free in Cuba because the insurance had run out on their policies. Public servants who in 9/11 ran to save lives were being ignored after having been hailed as heroes. Medical emergencies where, when people thought they could attack a post-apartheid South Africa by white flight, and doctors and medics fleeing to Europe, getting jobs, including in our health service, that was filled by Cuban doctors who were maintained the health service and expanded it. Developing schools in Cuba to bring people from those countries where they're given support to actually train them so they can go back to their countries. Cuba is being punished because it's offering an alternative to the neoliberal model that is dominant in our world. America is frightened that others will follow their example. Therefore, when we are supporting this motion, we are not just opposing sanctions on the people of Cuba, which would be enough, but we are opposing sanctions on the poorest and most vulnerable people in Latin America and the global south. Please support this motion, and I'll no use the phone next time.
Thanks, Delegate. Thank you, Delegate. Can I now call on a formal seconder for the motion? Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 114, Cuba, off the list. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll now take you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Thank you. Any abstentions? Motion 114, Cuba, off the list is carried. I now call on motion 115, artificial intelligence, exploitation of workers from the Global South and international solidarity. I invite the STUC Black Workers Conference to move the motion. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Congress President Cheryl Govin here from the STUC Black Workers Conference, moving motion 115. Congress, we're all likely too aware how resources and labour from the Global South, or exploited South, is appropriated by the Global North to sustain its high consumption, be it clothing, food, or precious minerals for our tech. Labour is exploited at every step of the way, and even more dystopian is that the North processes materials, sells it back to the South at higher prices. Utilising a lack of competition and bargaining debt as a tool keeps the exploited in its place and the exploiter well off. As a further thank you, the effects on the environment by predominantly the North exerts itself disproportionately to the Global South, who contribute mere fractions towards the climate change that devastates their homes and families. We're in a Black Mirror-esque world where we see AI everywhere, eye-wateringly high salaries and perks for those working in tech, and the total opposite for those providing the labour. Take self-driven cars, which require human annotators to train algorithms to mimic human pattern recognition in images. Annotators in Venezuela or North Africa are paid on average 90 cents an hour, going down as low as 11 cents an hour. The pressures to fulfil quotas, lest a job and someone's livelihood be lost, is something we would never accept in our own workplaces. Additionally, cobalt, a critical component in every rechargeable battery, the Democratic Republic of Congo provides 60% of the world's cobalt supply, which is mined by 40,000 children, according to UNICEF's estimates. They are paid $1 to $2 for working up to 12 hours a day, and they're inhaling toxic cobalt dust as well. There are too many more atrocities to describe. Whilst we may associate AI with the virtual world, it is rooted in material objects, data centres, servers, smartphones and laptops. All of these are dependent on materials that need to be taken from the earth, with risks to workers' health, local communities and the planet. As long as the Global North maintains its apathy, then artificial intelligence will continue recolonising the Global South and worsening inequality. Go back to your workplaces and organise around AI as an equality issue. At your bargaining meetings, you can demand a supply chain audit for any aspect of your work involving AI. International solidarity and using our voice to accept nothing less for others than what we would for ourselves is imperative more than ever. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for the motion to be formally seconded. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 115, artificial intelligence exploitation of workers from the Global South and international solidarity. Please note that, Please note that the General Council recommends support. I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 115, artificial intelligence, exploitation of workers from the Global South and international solidarity is carried. Delegates, we will now move to continue the business that was not taken on Monday and Tuesday. We have a number of motions, sorry, Mike. We have a number of motions still to debate at Congress, and I have to say we are running very tight on time. I will try to keep things running smoothly, but it's just a reminder that we have a number of composites. If colleagues wish to formally second and support, that would be accepted. I'll now call on Composite K, Advancing Fair Work, covering amendment motions 67, motions 68, 69, 70 and 74. I invite PCS to move the composite motion.
President, Congress, Ruby Gibson, moving Composite K on behalf of PCS. Congress, it's 2025 and Scotland is meant to be a fair work nation. A fair work nation should mean that when everyone goes to their work, they have an effective voice, they're respected, they feel secure and they have opportunities and feel fulfilled in their jobs. A fair work nation should be one where zero-hour contracts don't exist, where workers' rights are respected and unhindered, where trade union recognition and collective bargaining is universal, and where workers have an effective voice through an independent and democratic mechanism through their trade union. The reality is, though, Congress, it's 2025 and Scotland is not a fair work nation. In 2018, PCS and our civil service unions, Prospect and the FDA, signed a landmark fair work agreement with Scottish ministers for the Scottish civil service employers. This agreement is the most robust of its type, and it includes a commitment to no zero-hour contracts, a commitment to supporting and respecting the right to strike by not using agency staff to cover striking workers, and to implement partnership agreements that ensure proper and meaningful consultation with unions on any organisational change. This agreement applies to the 5 Scottish civil service employers. However, there are around 70 employers under the remit of the Scottish Government's own pay policy, and this agreement states that the principles apply to these employers as well, and that the expectation is that they create their own local fair work agreements. Congress, this agreement highlights the desire of the Scottish Government and its agencies to be gold standard employers, and don't get me wrong, progress has been made because of this agreement. However, the reality of the last 7 years has not been gold standard. The reality is that none of the other 60-odd employers under the Scottish Government's own pay policy have created a fair work agreement in the last 7 years. The reality is that in one employer, it took PCS nearly 2 years to get recognition because of one anti-union HR manager. The reality is that in 2022, when the cost of living crisis was crippling working people, especially the low paid, like our members in the National Galleries of Scotland, who voted in a supermajority to take strike action over this, their employer repeatedly threatened to use agency workers to break that strike. PCS fought against this and we won, but the fact is there's nothing in place to prevent this. Congress, the most egregious example of fair work principles not being respected just now is something that is happening right now. On Monday, the First Minister stood right here and spoke about fair work and how much value he places in the initiative and the ideas of the trade union movement and the importance of us working in partnership with his government to shape policy for Scotland. Well, Congress, maybe the First Minister can tell us why his Minister for Public Finance, Ivan McKee, is currently working on a strategy for public sector reform and he has not engaged one public sector union in that strategy. That's not giving our members an effective voice, or respect, or opportunity, and I tell you what, it certainly is not making them feel secure. Congress, it's clear that there has been progress in Scotland becoming a Fair Work nation, but the progress is not good enough. To be a true Fair Work nation, the Scottish Government needs to implement conditionality criteria for public funds that enforces union recognition and collective bargaining as standard. Further to this, the Scottish Government needs to monitor and enforce conditionality principles and sanction employers that don't comply with this. Congress, we know what our members achieve when they force the political class to act. For Scotland to be a Fair Work nation, the Scottish Government has proven again that they will need to be forced to make this a reality. Congress, please support this motion. Composite.